Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining, everybody. Today, we are going to check something off the bucket list. One of our goals for 2025 was to do a single barrel pick with Old Dominic in Memphis, Tennessee. And for this pick, we collaborated with Dusty Dan, Drifting Drams, and Chris over there at Bourbon of the Week. Today's episode is only going to be one segment because I must admit, I got so excited during the filming of cracking open this barrel pick and talking about it, but I got carried away. So as of recording, this barrel pick is going to be dropping very, very soon. So if you're interested in anything you're about to see, be sure to join our private Facebook group, link in the description, or consider supporting the channel through Patreon. They are first in line to pick up these single barrels. And if you can't get your hands on our single barrel pick, use this as an introduction of Old Dominic, one of our favorite distilleries making bourbon in the U.S. today. So thank you for joining today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. We don't just review whiskeys here at Hello Again, Whiskey Friends. We also collaborate with our friends all around the country to find the best barrels we can for this community. If you're curious what we're coming up with next, be sure to join our Patreon or our private Facebook group. Links in the description. So today's tasting is going to be all about Old Dominic, coming out of Memphis, Tennessee. And if this is your first time seeing this Old Dominic label, that's kind of the point of why we're doing this. So for us, this journey began really a few years ago, where Kelsey, Darrell, and Katie and Ethan over there at Drifting Drams kept collecting single barrels of Huling Station, either the bourbon or the wheat whiskey, but this was a bottle that we knew was pretty special, and people weren't talking about it. Now, what was happening behind the scenes is that Old Dominic was sourcing from MGP, and that's how they were getting their distillery started while their own stuff was aging. And this Huling label was their vehicle for those releases. Now, what makes this so unique, though, is the mash bill. 52% corn, 44% rye, and 4% malted barley. So when it comes to MGP, a lot of people talk about the 21% rye recipe or the 36% rye recipe. Not many people even knew the 44% rye recipe existed. The other thing that made these picks great was the price tag. Getting 8-year MGP for around $60, $65, depending on the store. So with the help of this community, as this channel grew enough that we could support barrel picks, we reached out to Old Dominic and set up the pick for the bottle that's in my hands, our own Huling Station. We did this pick in collaboration with Jason at the Mash and Drum, Dan from Dusty Dan's Whiskey Reviews, and Katie and Ethan over there at Drifting Drams. Now, while we were at Old Dominic in Memphis in person, doing the tasting for this barrel pick, Clark and our friends at Old Dominic wanted to know if we'd be interested in doing a pick of their own distillate. At the time, we had never tried it before, and really, we were just MGP hounds, and we wanted in on the MGP at the Huling Station that we've been enjoying the last couple of years. After the tasting was over for this pick, Clark still wanted to make sure that we didn't leave without tasting Old Dominic's own bourbon. He provided us samples, also gave us bottles of the batch so that we could get to know this bourbon more. And I know Darrell was the one that was love at first sip, because even at that tasting, I saw his eyes get wide and he was like, oh, maybe we should have picked one of these. That bottle and that batch that Clark gave us, that was 6 years at the time, ended up making our top 10 of the year and was in our end of year tournament. In that particular blind flight, it ended up coming in second place, and our guest host that day was Matt Porter over there at ADHD Whiskey. And if you were to go back and watch that video, he was most interested in understanding what the Old Dominic was because it caught his eye in that tasting and he hadn't heard of it or tasted it prior to that blind flight. We stayed in contact with Clark over there at Old Dominic, and you can go back to a live stream in April to watch us select the barrel that we are about to go through. Now, for this pick, this one is a collaboration with Dusty Dan, Drifting Drams, And now we've got Chris from Bourbon of the Week. Unfortunately, when we set up the live tasting with Old Dominic on our live show, Dan ended up not being able to come last minute, as did Chris, which left the burden on Kelsey, Darrell, Katie, and Ethan and I to select the barrel and hope that they agreed. But this one was the standout of the flight. Both Chris and Dan put it as first. And I've got text messages where we go step by step through Dan's tasting process as he's texting us updates on the fly. And he got to this sample, was immediately like, whoa, that one's a monster. And I can tell you the final product is even better than that sample bottle. All right, that was enough background. But it is a cool origin story, and that's why it was on our bucket list for 2025. We don't just pick things to pick things. We pick things because we're passionate about them. So then getting into the details of this. This is Old Dominic's own bourbon, 7 years, 122.57 proof. And then note the mash bill down there. 52% corn, 44% rye, and 4% malted barley. So mimicking that same recipe that they were getting from MGP prior for the Huling station. Now, of course, even though it has the exact same recipe, these bourbons aren't anything alike. And I'll do a little bit of a comparison between the Huling station and the Old Dominic at the end of this video. So now the rest of this video is going to serve first going through the tasting notes of this particular single barrel. But I hope that even if you aren't able to get your hands on our single barrel, that hearing what this tastes like inspires you to go try Old Dominic. Go to the website, see if you can get your hands on a batch. If you see a single barrel at a store near you or a group near you, maybe this will inspire you to take a chance on it. In terms of our community, I know Bruzel did a pick of Old Dominic a while ago, but I don't think anyone else has done one since. So this single barrel may be your introduction to the brand, and we think we did a great job picking a barrel that illustrates what we love so much about this bourbon. All right, enough jibber jabber. I am getting thirsty. So we're going to go through the nose, palate, into the finish. Then we'll get into some final thoughts, but I'll also compare it then to that MGP bourbon as well. So let's get into this nose here. Oh, this is such a fun nose to explore. And I'm really glad I poured this in advance and let it sit out that entire time I was going through all that background with you. When I initially cracked this bottle, I thought the nose was coming off a little hot. I wasn't sure if that was like ethanol hot or if it was just the spiciness from the 44% rye. But as I tend to do when I'm excited about things, I put it in the bulb glass for today's tasting so that I could really get deep into it. And it has none of that sensation anymore. All I'm getting is a whole lot of flavor. And it starts out with an oak that is actually older than I would say I expect from a 7-year age statement. Getting behind that oak is a range of fruits, ranging from more of a citrus, orange peel, all the way to berries. And we've been talking as a group and we're really starting to center in on calling those berries like a raspberry. Right next to the fruit, there's some sweetness. Comes off to me as a maple syrup, but then there's also a little bit of a nuttiness as well, like some crushed pecans. So that combination of the pecans and the maple syrup, oh, that is a good combination for me. Diving deeper, you get into the spice side of things. You know, the rye spice, of course, sticks out being 44% rye, but man, it goes as far as even getting into some clove and just a range of spices as well. The last thing that I'm getting here, kind of like a hint of a dark chocolate too. I mean, that's a whole lot of flavor notes just on a nose. I think this is one that you could sit down and spend 10 minutes exploring if you wanted to. And despite my praise, the nose isn't even going to be my highlight on this thing. So let's get into the taste. Cheers, everybody. Thank you for joining me this far. Gosh darn, this is hitting today. That was great. You know, up front initially, it is that berry blast that we've been talking about, particularly that raspberry leaning, still a little bit of that citrus and that orange peel. And there's this nice balance going on between that sweetness, which I'm still leaning on calling a maple syrup, and then all of that spice up front, either from the rye or baking spices, clove, but all that's perfectly balanced. The other thing to note too is the mouthfeel. Oh my gosh, this thing is an oily mess. You know, I'll zoom in on that glass there so you can kind of see what it's doing to this bulb glass, but there is not a single part of this glass that isn't just saturated right now with grooves and oils and all those legs. I mean, getting further into it, that transition to mid-palate, those flavors are pretty consistent all the way through, that berry blast, the sweetness, the spice, but then enters this interesting layer of custard and this creaminess too to go along with it. Just so much going on. So fun to pick apart. Man, the finish is where things really start to shine as well. Because not only are you getting all those flavors that I've been talking about this entire time, the berries, a little bit of that orange peel, the custard, clove, the maple syrups with a little bit of that pecans. The surprising element is the oak that hits you on the finish. I mentioned it on the nose, but you don't actually get it through the tasting until you get to the finish, and it just lingers. And it, once again, defies its age statement of 7 years. Some of that just might be the difference in the Memphis climate and that humidity and what it's doing to those barrels. But there is a deep, dark oak on this. And I don't even think I'd mentioned this off the bat, but I think this is going to be around like 65 bucks. So all of that for 65 or so. Same as the Huling station. I don't talk about the scores that I do on our own barrel picks very often. Like, we don't go through the whole score system, and I don't give you the precise score because, once again, I'm a critic of something that I picked, like, feels disingenuous. But I still go through the process end to end like I would on any bottle that enters my house. And I will say, this scored higher on paper than any other bourbon that we have picked so far. So I don't want to overhype, but I do want to communicate that we really think this one's special behind the scenes. So really excited to hear community feedback as this gets into people's hands, and just to see if they are as high on it as we are thus far behind the scenes. Now, the other thing I think is fascinating, and I just want to talk about this a little bit here before we wrap up this particular tasting, but I'm going to pour a little bit of our Huling Station pick. Now, this is an 8-year bourbon, but MGP distilled, yet it shares the exact same recipe, being that 44% rye. Now, you know on the channel that I am a huge MGP hound. The cabinet behind me is essentially filled with just different MGP NDPs. It's my favorite distillery. And if you go back to a prior video, the Huling Station did win a blind that I did where I compared all of our MGP picks to date, and this is the one that emerged. Now, I know a lot of people have the Huling Station and they appreciate this one, so I'm going to give a little bit of a head-to-head comparison, but it also tells you how the same recipe can give totally different flavor notes, just depending on who makes it. You know, even if it has the same recipe proportions, the grain could be different, the suppliers are different, the barrels could be different, all those things could be different. Even the equipment used, if all those things are the same, could still create a different result. So getting into the Huling Station here, these noses are absolutely nothing alike. Very berry forward though, I will say they have that same quality. The oak on the 8-year Huling Station, which is from MGP, less pronounced. And while the sweetness is there, it's more honey leaning than, say, the depth of the maple and everything. But as much as I love the Huling Station pick, there is not as much depth on the nose compared to Old Dominic's own distillate. Let's see the Huling Station on the taste. More delicate, less spicy, still custard and berry leaning though, so there are some similarities between these two. But now going back and forth to the Old Dominic pick, there's really no comparing these two head to head. The Old Dominic is just a more impressive bourbon than the Huling Station pick that we did last year. And again, that was one of my favorite picks. In conclusion, I don't want to oversell this Old Dominic to you, this particular single barrel. What I want you to do is to give Old Dominic a chance if you haven't. Whether it's one of their blends, whether it's a single barrel you can get from a different group, go check out what they're doing because it is very, very impressive. All right, cheers, everybody. You might hear about drifting drams from our barrel picks, but not only do they know whiskey, they know coffee even better. Katie and Ethan are always bringing in the best coffee they can for this community. And if you enjoy coffee or you are curious about getting into good coffee, you need to check out Drifting Drams. Fancy coffee for regular people. So check out their website to support a small business that is passionate about what they produce. And they will forever change the way that you look at coffee. Thank you for watching. Hello again, whiskey friends, everybody. A big shout out to our amazing Patreon community. If it wasn't for you, we couldn't continue to produce the content and barrel picks week after week. And for everybody else out there, be sure to hit that like and subscribe. It really helps the channel more than you know. And we'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye, everybody.